6 months had passed since the destruction of Kepler Station, and the galaxy looked very different. What had started as a siege against humanity had become a desperate defense by the alien coalition. Human fleets struck without warning at targets. Across 100 star systems, appearing from jump space like vengeful ghosts, Dr. Janet Pierce stood in the underground laboratory beneath the ruins of Geneva, surrounded by equipment that would have been impossible to build just a year ago. She was a small woman with gray hair and hands that shook slightly from too much coffee and too little sleep. For the past 6 months, she had been working on humanity's most secret project. "The calculations are confirmed," she said to the holographic image of President Johnson. "The Cascade drive is ready for field testing." The president looked older than he had during his famous declaration. Dark circles under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights spent making impossible decisions. "Explain it to me one more time, Doctor, in simple terms." Janet walked over to a metal device the size of a refrigerator. Wires and cooling tubes covered its surface like mechanical veins. The drive destabilizes the quantum foundations of matter itself. When activated, it creates a chain reaction that spreads through any solid object, breaking down the atomic bonds that hold it together. She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Put simply, Mr. President, it can turn an entire planet into energy. The explosion would be visible from the next galaxy." Johnson was quiet for a long moment. "And you're certain it will work?" "We tested it on an asteroid last week," Janet replied. "A rock 10 kilometers wide became a cloud of superheated gas in 30 seconds. The energy release was exactly what our models predicted." Meanwhile, Admiral Chris Thompson stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, watching the blue-white star that warmed the Zephyrian homeworld. His fleet of 500 ships hung in space just outside the system's gravity well, preparing for the most audacious attack in human military history. Chris was 50 years old, with silver hair and eyes like winter ice. He had been fighting aliens for 20 years, ever since they destroyed his first ship during a diplomatic mission. His daughter had been on that ship, fresh out of the academy and eager to explore the galaxy. She never got the chance. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "long-range sensors confirm 50,000 Zephyrian defenders around their homeworld. They know we're coming." Chris nodded. The Zephyrians had ruled their part of the galaxy for millions of years. Their technology was so advanced, it seemed like magic to younger species. Their homeworld was protected by energy shields that could stop anything humans had ever built. "Signal the fleet," Chris ordered. "Prepare to jump. Target the shield generators first, then the orbital platforms. Remember, we only get one chance at this." The human ships vanished from normal space and reappeared in the heart of the Zephyrian system. Immediately, the sky filled with crystal. Ships that moved like living things, their hulls shifting and changing as they maneuvered. Energy beams bright enough to blind unprotected eyes lanced between the opposing fleets. But this time, humanity had a new weapon. The UE's Destiny, a modified science vessel, approached the Zephyrian homeworld while the battle raged around it. Deep in the ship's cargo bay, the first production model of the Cascade drive hummed with barely contained power. Captain Sarah Wells, a young woman with red hair and freckles, watched the countdown timer on her control panel. 30 seconds to deployment, she announced to her crew. Around her, men and women who had volunteered for what might be a suicide mission prepared to change the course of galactic history. The Cascade drive launched from the Destiny like a missile, its metal casing glowing with heat as it plunged through the Zephyrian homeworld's atmosphere. The planet below was beautiful beyond description, covered in crystal cities that sang with harmonic frequencies. Billions of ancient beings lived in those cities, creatures that had existed since before. Earth's sun was born. "Impact in 10 seconds, Sarah announced. Her voice was steady, despite the magnitude of what they were about to do. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The cascade drive struck the planet's surface and activated. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then a sphere of absolute darkness appeared at the impact site, growing larger with each passing second. Everything it touched simply ceased to exist, broken down into component atoms, and then into pure energy dot. The effect spread like a virus through the planet's crust. Crystal cities that had stood for eons crumbled into glowing dust. Mountains turned to gas. Oceans boiled away in seconds. The Zephyrian homeworld, ancient beyond measure, died in 30 minutes. The explosion that followed could be seen from neighboring star systems. Where a planet had once orbited, only an expanding nebula of superheated gas remained. The shock wave destroyed every Zephyrian ship within 1,000,000 kilometers and sent the survivors fleeing in terror. But humanity's greatest victory came not from superior weapons alone, but from an unexpected alliance. Lieutenant Sarah Wells received a priority transmission while her ship fled the expanding destruction. The message came from the Kelani homeworld, deep in what had been Bortani space. Human fleet, this is General Kren of the Kelani Liberation Army, the alien voice said. We have disabled the psychic dampeners that kept our people enslaved. 12 billion Kelani warriors are now free and ready to fight alongside humanity against our oppressors. Similar messages poured in from across the galaxy. The Ran, whose homeworld had been strip-mined by the architects, offered detailed intelligence about machine weaknesses. The Delvian refugees, scattered across 100 worlds by Zephyrian expansion, pledged their small but advanced fleet to the human-caused Captain Alana Vasquez, now promoted to Admiral after her success at Kepler Station, found herself commanding not just human ships, but vessels from a dozen different species. Her flagship, the U's Liberation, led a combined fleet toward the prison world of Gryan. Gryan was a nightmare made real, a planet where the Galactic Council sent beings whose only crime was refusing to submit to alien rule. Millions of creatures from hundreds of worlds lived in massive camps, worked to death in mines and factories that produced weapons for their captors. All ships, this is Admiral Vasquez, Elena announced as her fleet dropped out of jump space above the prison world. Our mission is simple. We free everyone down there, and we make sure the galaxy remembers that humanity fights not just for humans, but for the right of all species to be free. A battle for Gryan lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the planet's orbital defense platforms were debris, and its alien guards were either dead or fleeing for their lives. Liberation ships landed in the prison camps, their holds filled not with weapons, but with medical supplies and food for the starving prisoners. Elena stood in the main prison camp, watching as beings from 100 different worlds walked free. For the first time in decades, some had been imprisoned for so long they had forgotten what freedom felt like. Others wept openly as they realized their nightmare was finally overdone. An old Ran approached her, his reptilian features scarred by years of forced labor. "Why do you fight for us?" he asked in broken human speech. "Your people could have negotiated your own freedom. Why risk everything for strangers?" Alana looked around at the thousands of freed prisoners, at the human Marines sharing their rations with starving aliens, at the mixed crews working together to repair damaged ships. Because freedom isn't worth much if you're the only one who has it, she said simply. A message she transmitted that day would spread across the galaxy faster than any weapon. This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Human Liberation Fleet. To every species listening to this broadcast, we are not your conquerors. We are not your new masters. We are your allies in the fight for freedom. She paused, watching as former prisoners helped load supplies onto rescue ships. Humanity doesn't just refuse to kneel. We teach others to stand. 2 years had passed since President Johnson's declaration echoed across the galaxy, and the war was over. Not because one side had been completely destroyed, but because the very idea of the old galactic order had crumbled like a building with rotten foundations. The mighty Galactic Council, which had ruled 1,000 worlds for millennia, now existed only in history books. Ambassador Lisa Martinez stood once again in a diplomatic chamber, but this time everything was different. The room was on New Geneva Station, built from the wreckage of 3 alien battleships that humanity had captured during the war. Instead of facing her enemies across a negotiating table, she looked down at the remnants of the once mighty Galactic Council. The Zephyrian representative was barely recognizable as one of the crystal beings who had once seemed so powerful. Her form was cracked and dim, like glass that had been shattered and poorly repaired. The destruction of their homeworld had broken something fundamental in the Zephyrian psyche, leaving them unable to sing their harmonic languages or think their crystal thoughts. The Vortani delegates sat in silence, cut off from the hive mind that had been his entire identity. When Kepler Station died, it had severed the connections between billions of Vortani across the galaxy. For the first time in their species' history, they were learning to think as individuals. Most of them were going insane from the loneliness. The architect representative looked exactly the same as always, a metal skeleton wrapped in glowing wires. But its red eyes flickered with uncertainty, constantly calculating and recalculating scenarios that no longer made sense. The machine intelligence had been built to maintain order in the galaxy, and order no longer existed. President Johnson appeared as a hologram beside Lisa, his image transmitted from Earth, where he was overseeing the reconstruction of the planet. The scars on the world's surface were healing, covered by new cities built with technology shared by humanity's alien allies. But the scars in Johnson's face showed the cost of victory. "The terms are simple," Johnson said, his voice carrying none of the anger that had driven him during the war. "There will be no more Galactic Council, no more forced relocations, no more species designated as too dangerous for freedom. Every world gets to choose its own government and its own destiny." The cracked Zephyrian made a sound like breaking glass. "You have destroyed the order that kept the galaxy stable for millions of years," she whispered. "Without the Council, there will be chaos. Species will war against each other. Pirates will raid undefended worlds. The galaxy will burn." General Amy Collins, now Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces, leaned forward. Her uniform bore the insignia of a dozen different species, representing the alliance that had grown from humanity's rebellion. "The galaxy was already burning," she said quietly. "You were just making sure only the right people got hurt." The architect's mechanical voice cut through the air. "Logical analysis indicates that some form of centralized governance is necessary for galactic stability. Surely some species require guidance. The younger races cannot be expected to govern themselves effectively." Admiral Ben Rodriguez, promoted, after leading successful raids against 3 architect factory worlds, stood up from his chair. His face bore scars from a plasma burn received during the battle for Gryan, but his eyes were steady. "Every species gets to make that choice for themselves," he said firmly, "including the choice to ask for help if they want it. But no one gets to make that choice for someone else. Ever again." Lisa activated a holographic display that showed the new treaty they had spent months preparing. It was called the Freedom Accords, and its central principle was carved into monuments across 200 liberated worlds. "The right to self-determination is not negotiable," she read aloud. The document was massive, containing provisions for trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, and technological exchange between hundreds of species. But at its heart was a simple idea that had driven humanity's rebellion from the beginning. Every thinking being deserved the right to choose their own fate. Dr. Helen Baker, now head of the Galactic Reconstruction Initiative, presented the final details. "We estimate that over 300 species or actively oppressed by the old council system. Another 1,000 were prevented from developing beyond certain technological levels. All of those restrictions end today. She gestured to another holographic display showing shipping routes and communication networks. The Jump Gate network will be maintained cooperatively by all member species. No single government will control interstellar travel. Scientific knowledge will be shared freely, with safeguards to prevent weapons development that could threaten entire worlds. The Vortani delegate spoke for the first time, his voice strange and halting without the backing of the hive mind. What about species that choose isolation? What about worlds that want no contact with others? Admiral Elena Vasquez, her uniform decorated with medals from grateful alien governments, answered without hesitation. They get left alone. Complete isolation if that's what they want. The right to say no is just as important as the right to say yes. The treaty signing took 6 hours, with representatives from over 400 species adding their names to the document. Some signed with hands, others with tentacles, claws, or energy patterns that left glowing marks on the quantum paper. Each signature represented a world choosing its own path for the first time in generations. But the most important moment came at the end, when the last signature was added and the new galactic order officially began. President Johnson stood to address not just the beings in the chamber, but the trillions of creatures watching across the galaxy. 2 years ago, humanity refused to negotiate our freedom away, he said, his words carrying to every corner of known space. Today, we stand in a galaxy where no species will ever again be forced to make that choice. The age of empires is over. The age of freedom has begun. Dr. Janet Pierce, watching from her laboratory on Earth, smiled as she looked at her latest project. The Cascade Drive technology that had destroyed the Zephyrian homeworld was being converted into construction tools, devices that could build worlds as easily as they had once destroyed them. Weapons of war becoming instruments of peace. Admiral Chris Thompson stood on the bridge of humanity's newest ship, the U.E.'s New Dawn. The vessel was heading toward unexplored regions of the galaxy, leading a fleet of ships from 20 different species. They were going not as conquerors, but as explorers, seeking new worlds and new civilizations to invite into the growing alliance of free peoples. The ship's first officer was a young Kelani named Siren, her reptilian features bright with excitement. As she looked at the star charts showing unknown systems ahead, "Admiral," she said in carefully pronounced human speech, "long-range sensors detect artificial signals from the Andromeda Spiral. There may be other galaxies with intelligent life." Chris nodded, remembering the words President Johnson had spoken during his famous declaration. "Then we'll make contact as equals," he said. "No empires, no conquest, no demands for surrender. Just one free people meeting another." The U.E.'s New Dawn jumped to hyperspace, carrying its message of freedom toward distant stars. Behind it, the galaxy settled into its new reality, a place where the strong no longer ruled the weak simply because they could. It would not be perfect. There would still be conflicts, still be suffering, still be injustice. But for the first time in galactic history, those injustices would not be imposed by law. Lisa Martinez stood at the window of New Geneva Station, looking out at the ships of 100 species docked at the station's ports. Human vessels worked alongside Kelani cruisers and Rand fighters, their crews mixing freely in the station's corridors. It was not the galaxy she had been born into, but it was the galaxy her children would inherit. The final transmission went out on all frequencies, carrying humanity's promise to the stars. The galaxy shuddered when we refused to negotiate our freedom away. Now it trembles with the possibility of what we might build together. The Vortani had ruled a quarter of the galaxy for 3,000 years. Their hive mind could think with the power of 1 trillion individual brains all working together. They had conquered dozens of species and crushed every rebellion before it could truly begin. War was a science to them, as precise as mathematics and as predictable as gravity. They were calculating the final assault on Earth. When humanity struck first, Kepler station hung in deep space like a massive metal city. The structure was 50 kilometers long and 20 kilometers wide, bristling with weapons and communication arrays. It served as the central nervous system for the entire Vortani military network. Every ship, every soldier, every strategic decision flowed through the station's quantum processors. The station was protected by 50,000 Vortani warships arranged in perfect defensive formations. Energy shields strong enough to stop asteroids surrounded the facility. Sensor networks monitored space for millions of kilometers in every direction. The Vortani considered it absolutely impossible to attack. Captain Elena Vasquez disagreed. She stood on the bridge of the UE's Retribution, watching the tactical display that showed Kepler Station and its massive defensive fleet. Her ship was one of 200 human vessels hiding in the shadow of a dead moon, their engines cold and their weapons powered down. They had been waiting here for 6 hours, invisible to Vortani sensors. Elena was 35 years old with black hair and scars on her hands from working in the engine rooms of cargo ships before the war. She had learned to fly by smuggling supplies to human colonies under alien blockade. The military had given her a commission because she knew how to move unseen through hostile space. "All ships report ready," her tactical officer said quietly. Lieutenant Mike Carter was young and nervous, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air on the bridge. This was his first major battle. Elena nodded and opened the fleet communication channel. 200 ship captains appeared on her screen, men and women from every human world, all waiting for her signal. They knew the odds. They knew most of them would not survive the next hour. "This is Admiral Morrison's plan," she said simply. "Hit them hard, hit them fast, and show the galaxy that humanity fights back. Remember what we're fighting for." The human fleet powered up their engines simultaneously. The new ships used experimental jump drives that could phase in and out of normal space, peering anywhere within a light minute without warning. The technology was stolen from a crashed alien scout ship and improved by human engineers working around the clock for months. "Jump in 3 seconds," Elena announced. 2, 1, execute. Space twisted around the human ships like fabric being folded. Reality bent and snapped back into place. In an instant, 200 human vessels materialized in the middle of the Vortani defensive formation, their weapons already firing. The first salvo of human plasma cannons tore through a dozen Vortani cruisers before the aliens even realized they were under attack. A second salvo destroyed an entire squadron of fighters. The third punched holes in Kepler Station's outer hull, venting atmosphere and debris into space. The Vortani fleet tried to respond, but their ships were designed for orderly battle formations, not close-quarters combat. Human vessels darted between the larger alien ships like angry insects, too fast and too small to target effectively. Every few seconds they would vanish into jump space and reappear somewhere else. Weapons blazing, Commander Ryan Lay led a boarding party onto Kepler Station itself. His team of 50 Marines used personal jump packs to phase through the station's hull, appearing directly inside the command center. The Vortani guards were insectoid creatures with 4 arms and compound eyes, but they moved too slowly to stop humans in powered armor. "Secure the quantum processors," Ryan shouted over the sound of gunfire. His team spread out through the station's corridors, planting explosive charges on critical systems. The Vortani hive mind was screaming in confusion as its connection to 1,000,000 ships began to fail. Back in space, Elena watched her tactical display with grim satisfaction. The human fleet was taking heavy losses, but they were inflicting far more damage than they received. Vortani ships exploded in brilliant, Flashes of light as human weapons found their targets. The aliens' perfect formation was collapsing into chaos. "Captain, we're getting a priority transmission from Commander Lee," her communications officer reported. Ryan's voice crackled through the static. "Charges are set. Station will blow in 60 seconds. All ships prepare for emergency jump." Elena activated the fleet channel. "You heard him. Phase out in 50 seconds. Rally point is the asteroid field at Grid 77 Alpha." The human ships began disappearing one by one, vanishing into jump space just as Vortani reinforcements arrived. Elena's ship was among the last to leave, staying behind to cover the retreat of damaged vessels. "Captain, we need to go now," Lieutenant Carter said urgently. Vortani plasma beams were starting to find their range, scarring the Retributions. Hull with near misses. 10 more seconds, Elena replied, watching as the final human ship made its jump. "Now execute emergency jump." The Retribution vanished just as Kepler Station exploded. The blast was visible from 3 star systems away. 50,000 years of Vortani military engineering vanished in a ball of nuclear fire that outshone the local sun. With it died this command structure that controlled over 1 million alien warships scattered across dozens of worlds. For the first time in their species' history, the Vortani hive mind experienced something they had no word for: confusion. Ships that had received orders every second for centuries suddenly found themselves cut off from the collective consciousness. Captains who had never made an independent decision in their lives struggled to function without guidance from Kepler. Station. The psychological impact was even greater than the military one. The Vortani had believed their hive mind made them invincible, that no individual species could match their collective intelligence. Humanity had just proved them wrong. In the most dramatic way possible, Elena stood in the medical bay of her ship, watching doctors treat the wounded from her crew. They had lost 30 ships and over 1,000 people in the attack on Kepler Station. But they had accomplished something no species had ever done before. They had struck at the heart of Vortani power and lived to tell about it. "Captain." A young ensign approached her with a data pad. "We're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Every species is talking about what we just did." Elena took the pad and scrolled through intercepts from alien communication networks. The translations were rough, but the meaning was clear. Fear, shock, disbelief that the small human fleet had destroyed something the Vortani considered indestructible. She handed the pad back and activated her ship's communication system. The message she recorded would be transmitted on all frequencies, reaching every corner of known space within hours. "This is Commander Elena Vasquez of the human fleet," she said, looking directly into the camera. "To the Galactic Council and all species who thought they could crush humanity with superior numbers. This is what happens when you mistake mercy for weakness." She paused, letting her words sink in. Behind her, through the viewports, the expanding cloud of debris that had once been Kepler Station glowed like a new star. "We gave you 10 years to find a peaceful solution. You chose war instead. Now you will learn what human warfare really looks like." The transmission ended, but its impact would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Within hours, 3 more major alien installations would be reduced to glowing debris. Humanity had revealed that while their diplomats spoke of peace, their military had been preparing for total war. The galaxy was beginning to understand that they had seriously underestimated the species from the small blue world. The massive space station hung in the black void like a gleaming metal flower. Nexus Prime was the largest neutral meeting place in the galaxy, built at the exact center point between 3 major territories. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its countless ports, bringing diplomats and traders from across the stars. Today it would host the most important meeting in galactic history. Ambassador Lisa Martinez walked through the polished corridors toward the main conference chamber. Her heels clicked against the metal floor with each step. Behind her followed Admiral Jake Morrison, a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes who had fought in space battles for 30 years. Dr. Helen Baker walked beside him, carrying a thick folder of documents that nobody would probably read. Lisa wore her best diplomatic uniform, dark blue with golden trim that caught the station's bright lights. She had been Earth's chief negotiator for the past decade, sitting through hundreds of meetings just like this one. Each time the aliens made the same demands. Each time humanity said no. Today was supposed to be different. Today was supposed to be the last chance. The conference chamber was enormous, with a ceiling that stretched up into shadows. A round table sat in the center, large enough to seat 50 beings from different worlds. The human delegation took their assigned seats on one side. Across from them sat the representatives of the Galactic Council, the most powerful alliance in known space. The Zephyrians looked like walking crystals, their bodies made of clear blue, stone that rang like bells when they moved. Their high speaker was ancient, even by their standards. His crystal form, so clear, was almost invisible. Next to him sat the Vortani delegate, though delegate was the wrong word. The Vortani were a hive mind, billions of creatures, all sharing one consciousness. The being at the table was just one body controlled by their collective, while dot at the far end sat the architect representative, a machine intelligence that had been alive since before humans discovered fire. It looked like a metal skeleton wrapped in glowing wires. Its red eyes never blinked because it had no eyelids. Lisa had faced these three species many times before. They spoke for the Council, which represented over 2,000 worlds and countless trillions of beings. Humanity controlled exactly 12 planets and had a population of 30 billion. The math was not in their favor. The high speaker began to talk, his crystal voice ringing through the chamber like music. Ambassador Martinez, we gather here today to offer humanity one final opportunity for peace. The Council has prepared terms that will allow your species to survive. Lisa kept her face calm, even though her heart was beating faster. She had heard similar words before, but something felt different this time. There was finality in the alien's tone, a sense that this really would be the end of negotiations. The terms are generous, the high speaker continued. Humanity will be granted 3 worlds of your choosing. Your population will be limited to 2 billion individuals. All human military vessels will be destroyed. All weapons research will cease. In return, the coalition forces will withdraw from human space, and the attacks on your colonies will end. Admiral Morrison's jaw tightened. Lisa could feel his anger without looking at him. The coalition had been attacking human settlements for 10 years, killing billions of people. They burned entire colonies, destroyed trade ships, and bombed civilian targets. Now they wanted to call limiting humanity to 3 worlds generous. Furthermore, the crystal being continued, humanity will accept council oversight of your government, your reproduction, and your expansion into space. These measures are necessary to prevent your species from becoming a threat to galactic peace. Dr. Baker shifted in her seat. She had spent years studying alien cultures, trying to understand why they feared humanity so much. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy, not the smartest, not the most advanced. But something about them made every other race nervous. Vortani Collective spoke next, its voice like 1,000 whispers all talking at once. Your species displays dangerous tendencies. You are too aggressive, too unpredictable, too willing to fight when you should surrender. Other races have learned to accept their place in the galactic order. Humanity refuses to be civilized. The architect's mechanical voice cut through the air like a blade. Analysis indicates human behavior patterns are incompatible with stable galactic governance. Your species values individual freedom over collective security. This creates chaos and threatens established systems. Lisa listened to each speaker without interruption. She had heard these arguments before. Humanity was too violent, too chaotic, too free. They needed to be controlled for the good of everyone else. 3 worlds and 2 billion people. That was their final offer. The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to the human delegation. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Lisa could accept the terms and save what remained of her species, or she could refuse and watch humanity face the combined might of half the galaxy. She stood up slowly. Her chair made a soft scraping sound against the floor that seemed incredibly loud in the quiet room. Admiral Morrison and Dr. Baker remained seated, but she could feel their support, like a warm presence at her back. "Honored delegates," Lisa began, her voice clear and steady. "Humanity appreciates the Council's offer. We understand the time and effort that went into creating these terms. We recognize the power and authority of the species you represent." The aliens leaned forward slightly. They expected acceptance. After 10 years of war, after billions of human deaths, after watching their colonies burn, surely humanity would finally submit. However, Lisa continued, humanity's answer remains the same as it has been for 10 years. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. No. The crystal high speaker's form flashed with shocked light. The Vortani collective buzzed with confusion. Thousands of voices all talking at once. The architect's red eyes focused on Lisa with laser intensity. "You understand what this means?" The machine intelligence asked. "You choose extinction over survival?" Lisa smiled, but it was not a happy expression. It was the smile of someone who had made peace with a terrible decision. "We choose freedom over survival. We choose dignity over safety. We choose to remain human rather than become whatever you think we should be." Admiral Morrison stood up beside her. "Humanity does not negotiate with those who would cage us like animals. We have been fighting your coalition for 10 years, and we will keep fighting for 10 more if necessary." Dr. Baker rose as well, her folder of useless documents falling to the floor. "You call us dangerous because we will not submit. You call us unpredictable because we refuse to follow your rules. You are correct on both counts." The high speaker's crystal form was pulsing with agitated light. "You are 30 billion beings facing 2,000 worlds. You cannot win this war." Lisa nodded. "You are probably right, but we would rather die free than live as your prisoners." She gathered her things and turned toward the door. "Gentlemen, lady, this meeting is over." The 3 humans walked toward the exit. Behind them, the alien delegates erupted into argument. The Vortani collective was buzzing so loudly it sounded like a swarm of angry insects. The crystal beings were flashing different colors as they communicated in their light language. The architect was calculating possibilities at superhuman speed. As they reached the door, Lisa turned back one final time. "Tell the galaxy that humanity does not kneel. Tell them we do not beg. And tell them that the real war is about to begin." The blue marble of Earth hung in space like a jewel against the black sky. President Kevin Johnson stood at the window of his orbital office, looking down at the world that had given birth to humanity. Scars marked the planet's surface where alien weapons had burned cities and boiled seas. The lights of New Geneva flickered weakly through the smoke that still rose from its ruins. Kevin turned away from the window and walked to his desk. The weight of 30 billion lives pressed down on his shoulders like a mountain. In 1 hour, he would address not just humanity, but every living being in the galaxy. The message would travel on quantum channels to 1,000 worlds, translated into 1,000,000 languages. heard by creatures that had never seen a human face. General Amy Collins entered the office without knocking. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her uniform was crisp, despite the fact that she had been working for 30 hours straight. Dark circles under her eyes showed the strain of commanding humanities. Remaining military forces. "The transmission array is ready," she said. "Every human ship, station, and colony will broadcast your message simultaneously. The aliens won't be able to block all the signals." Kevin nodded and straightened his tie. He had written this speech himself, working through the night to find the right words. No advisors, no speechwriters, no diplomatic language. Just the truth. Spoken plainly. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked. Amy's expression darkened. 2,000 combat vessels of various sizes. Maybe 300,000 crew members total. The aliens have destroyed everything else. She paused. "Sir, they outnumber us 1,000 to 1. When they realize we're not surrendering, they'll come with everything they have." Kevin sat down at his desk and looked at the camera that would carry his words to the stars. Then we better make those words count. Meanwhile, deep in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, Captain Ben Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the U.S. Defiance. The ship was one of 50 new vessels built in secret shipyards hidden among the floating rocks. Nobody outside the human military knew they existed. Not yet. The Defiance was unlike any ship humanity had ever built before. Its hull was made from alien materials captured in battle, stronger than anything Earth's factories could produce. Its engines used zero-point energy, a technology stolen from a crashed architect scout ship. Its weapons could punch holes through mountains. Ben was a young man, barely 30, with dark hair and the kind of steady hands that made him perfect for flying experimental spacecraft. He had lost his family when the aliens burned the colony. On Kepler 7, his wife, his 2 children, his parents, all dead because humanity refused to kneel. "Captain," his first officer said, "we're receiving the presidential broadcast." Ben nodded. "Put it on the main screen." President Johnson's face appeared, filling the view screen. Behind him, the scarred surface of Earth was visible through the office window. The president looked tired but determined, like a man who had made peace with a difficult choice. "Citizens of Earth and all human colonies," he began. "People of the galaxy who can hear my voice. Today I speak not as a politician, but as a human being who refuses to watch his species be caged like animals." The words carried across space, bouncing from relay station to relay station, reaching every corner of human space and beyond. On Proxima Colony, families gathered around their screens. On New Moscow Station, workers stopped their repairs too. Listen, in the deep mining stations of the outer system, humans who had never seen Earth still called it home. "For 10 years, the Galactic Council has demanded our surrender," Johnson continued. "They have burned our worlds, killed our children, and destroyed our ships. They call this justice. They say we are too dangerous to be free, too violent to be trusted, too chaotic to live among civilized species." On the bridge of the Defiance, Ben's crew listened in silence. These were men and women who had volunteered for a mission they might not survive. They knew the odds. They knew what they were fighting for. "Today our diplomats met with the council one final time," the president said. "They offered us 3 worlds and 2 billion people. They would allow us to live if we accepted their control over our government, our military, our very right to exist as a free species." The transmission reached alien space as well, picked up by their monitoring stations and communication networks. On crystal worlds where the Zephyrians sang their harmonic languages, the human president's words rang out in harsh translated tones. In the vast hive cities of the Vortani, 1 billion minds focused on the small screen showing the human leader. Our answer was the same as it has always been, Johnson said, his voice growing stronger. No, we will not trade our freedom for your version of safety. We will not accept limits on our population, our territory, or our right to defend ourselves. We will not become your pets. General Collins watched from the Pentagon's war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the positions of every human ship in space. Red dots marked enemy fleets, thousands of them, all moving toward human territory. In a few hours, the real fighting would begin. To the species of this galaxy who think they can break our spirit, Johnson continued, you have spent a decade trying to teach us our place. You have shown us your power, your technology, your ability to destroy everything we have built. You thought this would make us weak. The president paused, letting his words sink in. On worlds across the galaxy, beings that had lived for thousands of years leaned forward to hear what the young human species would say next. You were wrong, Johnson said simply. Every attack has made us stronger. Every loss has made us more determined. Every demand for surrender has reminded us why we fight. You have not broken humanity. You have forged us into something harder than the metal of our ships. Captain Rodriguez felt a chill run down his spine. This was it, the moment when humanity stopped running and started fighting back. Today, we stop defending, the president announced. Today, we stop retreating. Today, humanity goes on the offensive, and we will not stop until every species in this galaxy understands a simple truth. The words echoed through space, reaching listening posts and communication arrays on 1,000,000 worlds. In the great archives of the architects, mechanical minds recorded every syllable. In the song halls of the Zephyrians, crystal beings stopped their eternal music to listen. In the hive cities of the Vortani, the collective consciousness focused all its attention on the human transmission. We are not your prey, Johnson said, his voice carrying the weight of 30 billion souls. We are not your problem to solve. We are not animals to be caged or children to be guided. We are humanity, and we bow to no one. The transmission ended with a simple message that would haunt the galaxy's nightmares for generations to come. Negotiations are over.